Have you ever heard about the Book of Mormon challenge? The challenge is basically given to anybody who doubts the authenticity of the Book of Mormon to challenge them to do the same thing that Joseph Smith did when he created the Book of Mormon, to write something that big, that long, that complex in that short of time. That's the Book of Mormon challenge. And the amazing thing is that Radio Free Mormon, may have actually beaten the Book of Mormon challenge without even knowing it. Stay tuned and learn more, won't you? Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. This is Radio Free Mormon on the air, broadcasting behind enemy lines. Tonight's episode, I beat the Book of Mormon challenge. It's Radio Free Mormon, episode 389. Today's date is March 22nd, 2025. Welcome to the show. So, what do I mean specifically when I talk about the Book of Mormon challenge? Well, let's go into a little bit of detail on that, shall we? Well, the earliest I ever heard of it was from Hugh Nibley. So this would be back 50, 60, 70 years or so ago when Hugh Nibley originally came up with the idea of challenging people to write the Book of Mormon themselves as a defensive mechanism to defend the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. The idea being that if you can't do it yourself, then Joseph Smith must have done it only through revelation and by God. And the fact that you can't beat the Book of Mormon challenge means the Book of Mormon is true. That's what it is, broken down to its very most basic components. Hugh Nibley, famous Mormon apologist, added a bunch of bells and whistles to the challenge, though. So it runs like this. Here is the Book of Mormon challenge, an assignment that Professor Hugh Nibley at BYU sometimes gave to students in a required class on the Book of Mormon. Though it is several decades old, it still offers a challenge worth pondering. And the following text is taken from the collected works of Hugh Nibley, Volume 8, Chapter 11, pages 221 through 222. Here it goes. See if this sounds familiar. Since Joseph Smith was younger than most of you, Hugh Nibley would tell his class, and not nearly so experienced or well-educated as any of you at the time he copyrighted the Book of Mormon, not in Canada, it should not be too much to ask you to hand in by the end of the semester, which will give you more time than he had, a paper of, say, 500 to 600 pages in length. Call it a sacred book, if you will, and give it the form of a history. Tell of a community of wandering Jews in ancient times. Have all sorts of characters in your story and involve them in all sorts of public and private vicissitudes. Give them names, hundreds of them, pretending that they are real Hebrew and Egyptian names of circa 600 BC. Be lavish with cultural and technical details, manners and customs, arts and industries, political and religious institutions, rites and traditions. Include long and complicated military and economic histories. Now, here he is sort of gilding the lily with the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon has some of these things in it, but nowhere near to the extent or to the floweriness, at least in my opinion, that Hugh Nibley is ascribing to it. And I've read it 20 to 30 times, so I have a basis for knowledge about what's in the Book of Mormon. Just wanted you to know that. He goes on, have your narrative cover 1,000 years without any large gaps. Well, actually, there are some very large gaps in there where he crams a bunch of people together. Once again, this is Hugh Nibley gilding the lily, making the challenge more difficult to accomplish than the Book of Mormon actually was for Joseph Smith. But he goes on, feel free to introduce religious controversy. Well, yes, and especially the religious controversies that are swarming about you in your day when you're writing the Book of Mormon. That's what Joseph Smith did. And philosophical discussion, but always in a plausible setting. Well, that remains a matter of some hot debate. Observe the appropriate literary conventions and explain the derivation and transmission of your varied historical materials. Boy, Hugh is really pouring it on here. Above all, do not ever contradict yourself. Ha! He knows perfectly well that Joseph Smith contradicted himself in the Book of Mormon, whereas Hugh Nibley probably would have put it. He knows perfectly well that the Book of Mormon in its original version did have contradictions, but here he's going to pretend like it doesn't. For now, we come to the really hard part of this little assignment. You and I know that you are making this all up. We have our little joke. But just the same, You are going to be required to have your paper published when you finish it, not as fiction or romance, but as a true history. After you have handed it in, you may make no changes in it. Well, except for all the changes that Joseph Smith made in the Book of Mormon. You see what I mean? In this class, we always use the first edition of the Book of Mormon. Well, that's the one with the contradictions in it mostly. What is more, you are to invite any and all scholars to read and criticize your work freely, explaining to them that it is a sacred book on a par with the Bible. If they seem over skeptical, you might tell them that you translated the book from original records by the aid of the Urim and Thummim, or seer stone. Why don't you add the seer stone in here, Hugh? You know Joseph Smith used the seer stone because you have access to the documents. You've actually read them before most of the other church had, and this is long before the church finally caved on the issue and published its essay, its gospel topics essay, admitting finally that Joseph Smith did use the seer stone in translating or dictating basically the Book of Mormon as we have it today, the whole thing. But he doesn't say that. He says Urim and Thummim. This is back in the days when we were still concealing the use of the seer stone as an institution. They will love that, he says. They'd love the seer stone more. Further, to allay their misgivings, you might tell them that the original manuscript was on golden plates, gold plates technically, and that you got the plates from an angel. Now go to work and good luck. So that is the Book of Mormon challenge as originally, I believe, enunciated by Hugh Nibley. He concludes with, to date, no student has carried out this assignment, which of course was not meant seriously. But why not? If anybody could write the Book of Mormon, as we have been so often assured, it is high time that somebody, some devoted and learned minister of the gospel, let us say, perform the invaluable public service of showing the world that it can be done. Well, I'm not a minister of the gospel. I don't know how devoted or valuable or learned I am, but it looks like I did it. Yeah, I actually beat this Book of Mormon challenge. Now, not with all the bells and whistles that Hugh Nibley puts on it, because he actually makes the Book of Mormon challenge so difficult that the Book of Mormon itself doesn't measure up to his test. But when it comes to the words and the time period, yeah, I think I did it. So let's go into this a little bit further, okay? Brian Hales has now picked up this torch about the Book of Mormon challenge, except he phrases it as, where did all the words come from? That is Brian Hales' battle cry. What he's talking about is the words that Joseph Smith came up with to write the Book of Mormon. Now, most people would have thought they probably came, a lot of them, from Joseph Smith's head. Like I'm talking to you right now, and these words are coming out of my head, that Joseph Smith's words kind of came out of his head too, and that's where the Book of Mormon came from. But no, this is a great mystery and a great challenge in the hands of Brian Hales. Where did all the words come from? I looked this up, and I found a talk that Brian Hales gave at Fair Mormon that was titled Artificial Intelligence Predicts the Skills Needed to Dictate the Book of Mormon. He's very on. Joseph Smith could not have done this, and if Joseph Smith couldn't have done this, then the only other alternative is God. It must be divine. And here on a page of this article, he has a slide there over on the left, and you see the heading of the slide says, where did all the words come from? This is exactly his battle cry. I wasn't kidding. This is what Brian Hales thinks is a good argument. And over here on the right side in the body of his talk, there's the title, Where Did the Words of the Book of Mormon Come From? So yes, that is something that he is keeping alive in his own unique way, the Book of Mormon challenge. Where did all the words come from? Thank you, Brian Hales. Now, here's a slightly closer to reality challenge on the Book of Mormon, okay? This was something I found on the internet, and actually this takes into account the reality of the situation a little bit more closely. Before I go to this, let me also say that this is something that over and over I see members of the church fall back on as like their final evidence that the Book of Mormon is true and that Mormonism itself is true. Is the Book of Mormon, not necessarily what's in it, but the fact that it exists, that it's so long, that there is complexity there, admittedly, and that it was dictated in so short a period of time. This to them seems miraculous. Therefore, the Book of Mormon must be true. Therefore, Joseph Smith must be a prophet. Therefore, the church Joseph Smith founded must be true. Therefore, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true, is how the argument tends to run. And this will be fallen back on when all the other evidences for the church fall apart under critical scrutiny, which they tend to do. And here's how it goes. The apologists say, when trying to convey how difficult it was to write a book comparable to the Book of Mormon, that, quote, it must be done in 60 days or something similar. That feels impossible, doesn't it? Can you sense your gut and mind feeling overwhelmed by that? But this isn't the best way to word it. Instead, consider the following. You must dictate the book in 60 days, though you will have years to contemplate the premise. Collect stories from your community and even your family. You are free to have anachronisms and contradictions in your book. You are free to plagiarize from any source you like and can even write out your story and use that for the dictation so long as no one sees you do so. Perhaps consider props. You are free to practice manipulating people from an early age of around 13 to develop your craft of what works and what doesn't. There, an oblique reference to Joseph Smith's money digging as a young man. Every time you approach the date to start, if you don't feel ready, you can push the project back a year. In the end, though, and that's the repeated trips to get the plates right over 4 years that Joseph Smith tells us about. You can push the date back a year if you don't feel ready to start. In the end, though, your story must be slightly different than all the sources you plagiarize so that people can't exactly come close to proving you are a fraud, though it may come within a razor's edge. That almost feels doable, doesn't it? So that is a much more realistic Book of Mormon challenge, taking into account what the Book of Mormon actually does look like, how it was put together, and the time that Joseph Smith had in which to dictate the book. This same Book of Mormon challenge gets repeated over and over today. Here's an example I found that was in a comment over in the comment section of a video that Austin Fife had produced. Here's how it goes. For the critics, this person says, for the critics, I always ask them to write their copy of the Book of Mormon under the same conditions and with the same context and similar content that Joseph Smith translated it. Never does one critic ever come back and say that he or she will take up the challenge. Well, I didn't take up the challenge, but it appears that I inadvertently actually succeeded in meeting and beating that challenge. Now, why is it that I didn't intentionally take up the challenge in the first place to beat the Book of Mormon challenge? The reason why I can tell you in 2 words, Kobayashi Maru. This is a no-win situation. This is a challenge set up by the apologists not to be beat. From the apologist point of view, if you were to produce a book that was similar in any way or even met all the criteria of their challenge, all they would do is say, well, here are the reasons that this doesn't qualify. Here are the reasons that you didn't really beat the Book of Mormon challenge because Joseph Smith didn't have a lot of education. But you RFM, you've been to high school, you've been to college, undergrad, and grad, you've been to law school, you've been a practicing attorney for 35 years. Obviously, that's not fair to compare you against Joseph Smith. Well, it's the only me I've got. I can't go back in time and make myself identical to Joseph Smith to try and do the challenge. That's the first thing. But the important thing to understand, the critical thing to understand, is there's no way any apologist is ever going to allow anybody to beat this challenge. They will never admit that it has been beaten. They will find any way they can to distinguish what you did or who you are or the way you did it from the way Joseph Smith did, so that Joseph Smith will always win. The house will always win in this particular gambling game. Here's what I wrote on my slide. Even if somebody were to take the challenge seriously and come up with a book that was in all material respects similar to the Book of Mormon in the allotted time, the apologists would have a field day ripping it apart and showing all the differences with the author and Joseph Smith, i.e. education and age, and all the differences with the Book of Mormon and the text that was produced. Not long enough, not enough place names, not enough Hebraisms, whatever. And I'm not making this up, okay? Because Brian Hales, he of Where Did All the Words Come From? He went through a number of different theories that people have come up with for how Joseph Smith created the Book of Mormon. And we did a show on that. It was a Mormonism Live. I think it was over a year ago. It was called Spirit Writing or Ghost Writing. This is what automatic writing is sometimes referred to as. And this is, in many respects, in a lot of respects, the closest analog to what it is that Joseph Smith did with the Book of Mormon, because we have an instance of an actual individual named Pearl Curran who lived in the early 20th century, who said that she was greeted or communicated with by a spirit entity named Patience Worth. And Patience Worth would give her the words to books. And she ended up, she being Pearl Curran, with the help of Patience Worth, it could be seen to be her Moroni in a sense, but Patience Worth was allegedly a disembodied spirit, I'm going from Wikipedia now, contacted by Pearl Curran. This purported relationship produced several novels, poetry, and prose, which Pearl Curran claimed were delivered to her through channeling the spirit of Patience Worth. So this is a remarkable instance, and in many ways similar to what Joseph Smith did. The thing about it is, and I want to use this as an example to show to what extremes Brian Hales and other apologists will go to disqualify things that are obvious examples of someone doing something very like dictating the Book of Mormon, like Pearl Curran did. She wrote and dictated long books, involved books, novels. Some of them mention Jesus. In the time period for the Book of Mormon, she did it with that rapidity and with the complexity. And she even has a book in which Jesus is talked about. So what Brian Hales comes down to is when she's able to produce a book that is as long, if not longer, than the Book of Mormon in a time shorter or as short as Joseph Smith produced it. And there's really nothing he can say about it now because she's really freaking beat the Book of Mormon challenge before the Book of Mormon challenge even existed. What he says is, in order to distinguish it and make it so she fails, is, yeah, she wrote about a Jesus, but she wrote about a different Jesus than the one we find in the Book of Mormon. I'm not kidding. We have the tape. Go back and play it if you want to, because it's a great episode. It's a remarkable episode. And it goes to show not only that people have historically created things that are similar to the Book of Mormon in ways similar to the way that Joseph Smith created it in a time frame similar to what Joseph Smith used to create it, but it also shows the apologists they're just lying. This is not a real challenge. They're never going to let anybody beat the challenge. So I would have to be, or anybody would have to be out of their mind to want to try and intentionally beat this challenge. It's a no-win. They are never going to allow anybody to beat this challenge. So why would you try it? That's the question. But I may have actually beat the Book of Mormon challenge by accident. First, we have to recognize that Joseph Smith did not write the Book of Mormon. He dictated it. Frequently, when the challengers, the apologists, are setting forth this Book of Mormon challenge, they will speak in terms of writing something. Joseph Smith did not write the Book of Mormon. He dictated it. Oliver Cowdery wrote down the Book of Mormon, at least almost all the Book of Mormon as we have it today. Oliver Cowdery is the one who was writing. Joseph Smith was dictating. So the question is, can you dictate a Book of Mormon in a time frame like Joseph Smith did? That's more accurate. I have sometimes made fun of Brian Hales' "Where did all the words come from?" challenge in the following way. Brian goes on and on for hours, and this is true, about this subject on several different platforms. He also goes on different platforms to talk about polygamy. He knows a lot about polygamy. He may be one of the, if not the best informed person on the planet about Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy. And he can go on for hours and hours about the subject because he knows it quite well. And he can go on for this subject for hours and hours because he knows it quite well as well. So Brian goes on and on for hours about the subject on several different platforms. If you took everything he said in just one episode and wrote it down, you would have the Book of Alma, or a substantial portion thereof. All I mean is this, is that even Brian Hales, whose argument is, where did all the words come from, even while he's making that argument, is talking for an hour, 2 hours about this subject, probably not without a lot of notes. Maybe he has notes. I don't know. Maybe Joseph Smith had notes. But basically, it's impromptu. It's extemporaneous. He's just speaking. Where are all those words coming from, Brian? They're coming out of your head, and they're based on all the studies that you've done and your acquaintance and your thought that you've given to this issue, right? So if you were to take a podcast that Brian Hales was on talking about where did all the words come from, and then get the transcription of it, you're going to have a substantial part, probably the better part of the Book of Alma. So what this means is that basically I saw that there was an analog between podcasting or being interviewed on a podcast or speaking on a podcast and what Joseph Smith did, which was dictating the Book of Mormon into existence. If I look at him as podcasting, all of a sudden, it's now in my backyard. It's in something that I have more comfort in, and it's in something that I could see, maybe I could do something similar to what it is that Joseph Smith did when he dictated the Book of Mormon into existence. Let's go to the next slide. This got me to thinking about how what I do as a podcaster is exactly what Brian Hales does when talking about a subject he knows something about. I talk and talk for hours. And if a scribe were to write down what I say, it would take up a lot of pages. Then it clicked for me. 9 weeks of glory, baby. Back at the beginning of COVID, I set a goal. You may remember this if you've been following me for a while, but this is back at the beginning of 2020. I set a goal of recording, editing, producing, and podcasting one podcast every weekday. You may remember the reason I did this is that basically business had shut down, society had shut down, and I was aware that there were certain people who were out there who were trying to reach out to people who were stuck at home during COVID in one way or another so that it would not be so lonely, so it would not be so isolated. It was Sir Patrick Stewart, I remember, was reading a Shakespeare sonnet every day just to reach out to people, just to keep that contact going. And business had really dropped off at the office. I'm still coming into the office, but I thought, look, I'm going to try and do my part here, and I'm going to try and do a podcast every day during this COVID thing. Now, COVID went a lot longer than my daily podcast did, but still, it was rather significant. So I kept this up for 9 weeks or 45 episodes in total. Once again, I'm doing it one episode every weekday. That's 5 days a week. 5 times 9 is 45 episodes in total. The date of the first episode was March 22nd, 2020. The date of the last episode was May 22nd, 2020. Exactly 2 months total. What are the odds? It's like it's all coming into alignment, isn't it? I wondered how many words that would be and how it would compare with the Book of Mormon. Factors to be taken into account in making this comparison. Number one, time period of total dictation / podcasting, right? The time period, the 2 months. 2, the number of words dictated per minute. Number 3, the total number of minutes dictated. And number 4, number of minutes dictated times the number of words dictated per minute equals the total number of words dictated. Does that make sense? I think this is pretty basic. It has to be basic for me to comprehend it when it comes to math, okay? But I do want you to look at my numbers. I've double-checked them. I've triple-checked them. I think they're correct. Make sure they're correct, because if so, I think Brian Hales is going to have to find a new line of work and stop talking about where did all the words come from, because every time he brings up, this is my goal, that every time he brings up his argument about Joseph Smith and writing the Book of Mormon and where did all the words come from, that the answer will be, well, Radio Free Mormon beat the Book of Mormon challenge. You know that, don't you, Brian? I would love to see the look on his face. Okay, then number 5, then compare, once you've got the total number of words that I dictated over this 2-month period, then compare with the total number of words that Joseph Smith dictated to create the Book of Mormon. Now, by the way, another way that any apologist could distinguish what I did is, well, it's not a narrative. I've already had that brought up when I mentioned this project to someone else. Well, it's not a narrative like the Book of Mormon. Well, no, it's not. But so what? I mean, it's very complex and complicated in its own way. And a lot of things that I say, believe it or not, there's people who think that it's more profound than the Book of Mormon. And I'm one of them. And you may be too, if you're watching this show. Leave a comment below about what you think about what I produce. Leave a comment below about what I produce in my podcast. Let me know if you think it's more profound than the Book of Mormon. Okay. So that is the way we find out, I think, on this slide. So we're going to go through each of these steps and figure it out one at a time. So the total period of dictation time, remember that was number 1, total period of time. And we know that was 2 months on the low end. Now they'll say 2 to 3 months, right? It's not exact, but basically around 2 to 3 months of dictation time, beginning sometime, I think, in early April of 1829. 2 months is the low end of the Book of Mormon dictation timeline. I went to an article. I believe this was from the Ensign. Yeah, it's January. It's I think it's 88. Sorry, it's in small print there at the top. How long did it take Joseph Smith to translate the Book of Mormon? Jack Welch, professor of law at BYU's J. Reuben Clark Law School and president of Farms at the time. So this was a while ago. He wrote this article. Basically, on this section of the article, he comes up with this. The translation was a staggering achievement. It was completed within 85 days. Okay, so that's the outer range, according to John Welch. He's a smart guy. 85 days. That's pretty close to 90. So that's the 2 months to 3 months I was talking about. He's got the maximum of 85 days from 7th of April, 1829 to 30 June of the same year. So I'm actually on the low end of the range that is proposed for the dictation time period of the Book of Mormon. The 2 months in which I recorded 45 podcasts from March 22nd, 2020 to May 22nd, 2020 is 25 days less than the estimate for Book of Mormon translation. So at least no apologist can say I had more time than Joseph Smith. So already I'm not only matching the challenge, I'm beating the challenge. The next question is, how many words do I dictate in a podcast per minute? So here's an article I looked up. It's called Typing Master, the Typing Master website. In general, it is considered that most people speak at a rate of around 110 to 150 words per minute in normal conversation. And I figured I would probably be up there at the 150 words per minute, not only because I speak quickly, but also because after I'm done recording, I will go back and I will edit out a lot of the space between the words so that it comes across even more quickly than it is that I'm speaking it originally. So definitely up there to 150 words per minute. But this was an important calculation, I felt. And I didn't want to say, oh, well, it's got to be 150 words because I edit out space and I talk a lot. No, this estimate was not good enough. I went to the actual transcript of several shows and manually counted the number of words per minute, which I was able to do. It came up in each instance to right around 150 words per minute. So my estimate was correct, but I wanted to go back and do the work to find out if it's 150 words per minute, because that's going to be an important component of this calculation on whether I actually did beat the Book of Mormon challenge. So we've got me podcasting for 2 months from March 22nd to May 22nd in 2020. We know that I podcast about a rate of 150 words per minute. And now the question becomes, how many minutes did I podcast over 2 months? So Joseph Smith here in the picture, he has something in that hat to look at, right? He's got a seer stone to concentrate his focus. And there I am on the other side. I've got my own kind of seer stone to concentrate my focus. At least at the time, I had a snowball microphone. And that's what I was using to dictate into during that 2-month period. So I had something to focus on, as well as Joseph Smith. But now I have this great microphone and some great equipment donated by a listener to the show. Thank you so much. But back in the day, I was still using a seer stone. I hadn't been promoted to the Urim and Thummim of my studio yet. In order to find out how many minutes total I podcasted, I had to do a lot of calculations. So the first thing I did was I went into the Radio Free Mormon archives to look up the different episodes. And here they are. Now at the bottom, you'll see I marked out the bottom 2 episodes, 128 and 129, because it doesn't start at that point. I wanted to mark those out. Those are not included in my calculations. And it's only at number 130, episode 130 of Radio Free Mormon, called Backdating Prophecy, that was on March 22nd, 2020. That's where the 9 weeks begins. That's where the 45 podcasts that I did over the course of those 2 months begins. Backdating Prophecy. And now this reads from the bottom up, you'll notice. Backdating Prophecy, My Corona, and so on, going on up. Then we go to this page, which has a ton of them, as you can see. Once again, going from the bottom up. And we have all of these podcasts that I did. You can see all the podcasts I did just in April of that year. And then we have the podcasts that I did in May. Now, typically at the time, I was doing maybe one every other week. So for most months, I've got like 2 podcasts, maybe 3 podcasts. This is a huge change as I've described it to you. And that's why. So there's all these podcasts going all the way up to 176, Born Again, Book of Mormon, Part 2. So there you go, from episode 130, Backdating Prophecy, all the way up to 176, Born Again, Book of Mormon, Part 2. Okay, so there are the actual episodes themselves. So what I did is I went back and I checked how long each of these episodes was. Now, the legal pad on which I wrote this down is from top to bottom, okay? So there at the top is March 22nd, 2020 in the left margin. It's number 130, episode 130. Here is the title, Backdating Prophecy. And there's the time in the right margin. That's going to be a very important margin. it was 1 hour and 27 minutes long. So the next one was March 24th. There was a weekend in between. 131 episode, My Corona, 50 minutes. So you can see that I have all that information, which I took down on this page and on several pages adjoining. I'm going to show you what they look like. Here's the second page. In the very far upper right, you'll see I have a number circled. That's the page number. Here's page 3. Here's page 4. And page 4 goes all the way down there to May 22nd. Then there's a line that I drew, and I don't count the ones below that, okay? So here's what we have going to the very first page, of the legal pad. What we have is this. If you look at the very bottom right, there are 4 episodes that I did not think was fair to count or include in this calculation because they were basically the playing of certain videotapes that I had gotten through the Freedom of Information Act. This had to do with the Provo Police Department and the NTC sex scandal. One of those was an hour and 19 minutes. Another was an hour and 8 minutes. Another was 55 minutes. You can see those numbers down there in the bottom right-hand corner of that paper. There was another that was 13 minutes. And I circled all of those because I didn't want to include those in the total. So the total on this page of everything except for those ones that I've circled is 678 minutes. This is what I've checked and double checked. You go ahead and double check it too. Keep me honest. I always get worried about doing math. You know that about me. But I've done this several times. I used a calculator, so hopefully it saw me through. And finally, I have gotten the same answer several times, so I think it's correct. But 678 minutes were podcasted on this page. In other words, from March 22nd down through April 8th on the bottom, but taking out those other podcasts that I didn't think in fairness should be included. So here we go to page 2. This takes us from April 8th on the top down to April 23rd on the bottom. Here are the episodes 144 through 155. And then there are the titles scratched out there. And then once again, on the right side are the very important numbers, the length of the videos. So there's the length of the videos. That's a total of 620 minutes. On the second page, first page, 678, second page, 620. And now we get to the third page. Third page goes from April 24th down to May 12th. It goes from episode 156 down to episode 168. And it has the time periods on the right. Once again, now that's a total of 692 minutes. That's a 2 off to the side. And if you see down there at the bottom right, where I had initially added them up and I came up with 772, this is a result of double and triple checking because I found out that was wrong. The other ones were fine from the get-go. This one was not for whatever reason, but I went back, redid it, and it's 692 is correct. Please double check me on that. Finally, on this fourth page, which is only a partial page, we go from May 13th down to May 22nd. Remember, it's from March 22nd to May 22nd. Episodes 169 through 176, and I total 462 minutes on this partial page. All right, so now I've collected the length in minutes of all the different episodes that I thought should be included in this calculation that I recorded and produced in that 2-month period from March 22nd, 2020 to May 22nd, 2020. So I've taken all those totals from all 4 pages, and now I've transferred them over to a new page so I can add them. There's the 678 from page 1, 620 from page 2, 692 from page 3. Once again, there's that mistake that I scratched out. Page 4, 462, I add them together, I get 2,452 minutes. 2,452 minutes of podcasting in that 2-month time period. All right, so we've got that much. What do we do with that? Well, we take the 2,452 and we multiply it times the number of words that I podcast per minute, which we've previously established was 150 words per minute. Once we've done that, we come up with the total, the grand total of 367,800 words total that I podcasted or dictated in those 2 months in 2020. 367,800 words. So finally, we have to ask ourselves, what is the word count of the Book of Mormon? Well, what better place to go to for that answer than Book of Mormon Central, now denominated Scripture Central, and find out the answer from the guys who really know. And here it is from an abstract from a paper there on that website. As far as its length is concerned, the Book of Mormon is a formidable document. The 830 edition contains 269,320 words and occupies over 580 pages of printed text. The Yale edition of the Book of Mormon, which attempts to get as close as possible to the original wording of the text, has 269,518 words. Despite regularly translating the book for hours on end, it still took Joseph Smith about 60 working days to complete the task of its dictation. Now, I want you to notice that about 60 working days. First off, remember the 269,000, okay? We'll round it up to 270 just to make it easier to remember. Total number of words in the Book of Mormon. When it says here in this paper that Joseph Smith worked 60 working days, about 60 working days to produce the Book of Mormon, remember it's working days. This isn't a contradiction with what Jack Welch had said earlier, that it took around 85 total days. This is just the working days because Joseph Smith was doing things on other days, traveling from place to place. He had to take care of certain things. He couldn't devote all of his time to dictating. Similarly, I didn't spend every day dictating. I dictated 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and I had the weekends off. But with me, my total working days were 45, right? 9 times 5. 5 days a week for 9 weeks. So my total working days were 45 days. So I completed my podcasts in 75% of the time that Joseph Smith used to dictate the Book of Mormon. He took 60 working days. I took 45 working days. All right, now for the comparison you've been waiting to see. Drum roll, please. So there you will see at the bottom of the paper, I included the total word count for the Book of Mormon. It says BOM, that's Book of Mormon, 270,000 words, right after the number of words that I dictated in 2 months, in 45 working days, which was 367,800 total words. So I not only beat the Book of Mormon challenge, I massacred it by almost 100,000 words. 270,000 words in the Book of Mormon, dictated by Joseph Smith in 60 working days, 45 working days for Radio Free Mormon. He dictates 367,800 total words, almost 100,000 words more than are in the Book of Mormon. That's pretty remarkable. So here's the summary. In 45 working days and 2 months total, RFM, that's me, Radio Free Mormon, dictated/podcasted 367,800 words. In 60 working days, this is for Joseph Smith, right? In 60 working days and almost 3 months total, Joseph Smith dictated 270,000 words, which became the Book of Mormon. 367,800 words is almost 100,000 words more than Joseph Smith dictated. So here is another comment that was made. This one, I think, on Reddit. Yeah, it's on the Mormon Reddit forum. Some authors have written short books quickly. This is a faithful member responding to this kind of allegation, admitting that some authors have written short books quickly, right? And then going on, how many uneducated and inexperienced authors have written something close to 269,320 words, i.e. the Book of Mormon, in one draft in less than 3 months? Is there any example of a feat remotely close to what critics say Joseph Smith did? And the answer to that is yes, there is. Me, Radio Free Mormon, did it. Let the word go forth from here. RFM beats the Book of Mormon challenge. So the next time somebody gives you the Book of Mormon challenge and asks you how anybody could have dictated so many words in so short an amount of time, you just tell them, well, I don't know, but Radio Free Mormon did the exact same thing. Only Radio Free Mormon did it with 100,000 more words than Joseph Smith dictated, and Radio Free Mormon did it in 75% of the time that Joseph Smith used. So this is the report. I think it's a remarkable thing. So as I said at the top, I obviously would not have intentionally tried to beat the Book of Mormon challenge, because now that I put out this podcast, I'll just sit back and wait for all the apologists to say, well, this is why it doesn't really beat the Book of Mormon challenge, because RFM has so much more education. He's so much older. He's had so much more experience. He's read so many books, blah, blah, freaking blah. He's a podcaster, right? Well, Joseph Smith was a storyteller, and that was the podcasting equivalent back in the early 19th century, I think. But regardless, I think this is significant that Radio Free Mormon has beat the Book of Mormon challenge. If you think this is significant, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please share this episode with somebody else. And thank you to all of the loyal listeners out there who've gone the extra mile, gone to radiofreemormon.org, clicked the donate button, and made a donation. If you haven't made a donation yet, would you please do so today? $5 a month is all I ask. Make it a continuing monthly donation. Enough people doing that, and you will keep Radio Free Mormon broadcasting behind enemy lines. Thanks for watching. That's about all for tonight. Until next time, this is Radio Free Mormon, signing off the air.